All right. So, what's up, everybody? It's Lakeem here at Natural Born Studios, and today is another episode of Capture the Culture Illustrated Masterclass. And today we have a cool class set up. We're going to be talking about perspectives and different ways to draw perspectives from pretty much three different lenses. From bird's eye view, what's the other ones? Pretty much from bird's eye view, regular eye view, and from worm's eye view. So we're going to be looking at three different ways to draw perspectives if you're an illustrator or an artist. And this style you can use this style across different mediums. So if you're a painter and you're working on paintings, this is something you can still apply. If you're an illustrator and you're working on digital graphics or on a computer, you can use programs like Procreate and Photoshop to do these type of drawings. Or if you're working on pen, or if you're working with pen and paper, you can use the same techniques. So today I did a rough sketch of three different perspectives that we're going to be focusing on today. So in the top left corner over here, let me open my layer. In this top left corner, we're going to be talking about bird's eye level, or I like to call it sky level, meaning the camera angles is at a high level, or you can call it high level, whichever one you want to call it. Is pretty much represents having your perspective line and at the top of your frame. So I'm gonna just put PL for perspective line. So bird's eye level means that your perspective line is up high. The next one is going to be eye level. And I have this character here. Eye level just means that your perspective line is pretty much in the center of the page. And it's almost like picturing someone standing up and looking directly ahead. And whatever that person sees that's directly ahead of him is pretty much eye level. Like that perspective line that goes directly ahead is eye level. We'll get into more details. So I'm gonna just write perspective. All right, so perspective is something that every artist use in their artwork, whether you're painting or if it's an illustration, digital drawing, anything that, I would say anything that uses perspectives pretty much helps the picture flow better, and it helps people see and understand what's going on in the frame. So the first example I have to the top left is bird's eye view. And bird's eye view just mean that the perspective line, which is right here, I'm gonna just title it the PL, is at the top of the page or at the top of the frame. So if it's a picture like the one that I have right here, I also found a few references from Google that I'm gonna be going over. But pretty much bird's eye view is at the top of the frame. And then you have eye level, which is pretty much when your perspective line is in the center of the frame. So on this second picture below, I kind of drew a rough sketch of a guy whose perspective is in the center. And today I'm gonna be illustrating these drawings and showing you guys how the perspectives look as it relates to characters standing in the frame. The third picture over here is from worm's eye level. And it's from a picture that I got off of a Spike Lee scene, actually, of a guy who's standing in the middle of the street. And he's like gazing off to the side. But the picture frame that they shot it from, or the camera angle that they shot it from in this frame, was from worm's eye view, meaning that One, it means that the perspective line is low. It's almost lower, is lower to the bottom of the frame. And it also means that it makes the character kind of hover above the frame itself. So I'm gonna show you guys how to draw from each one of these frames. But the main illustration I want to draw today is the picture that I got from this scene right here. I think it's dope. And I also think it captures the culture, which is another topic that we like focusing on in the classes that we teach as we teach principles of drawing. So I think this picture is dope because it captures the culture of one, like an urban environment. So you can see that's in the inner city. There's a few like cars in the background. It's kind of like old school cars. You can see that the guy have on his Jordan shoes in like a dope fashion. And even the haircut. A lot of people from I don't want to say a lot of people from urban areas can relate to like the box haircut and that fashion from like back in the 90s and things. So I think this picture is a dope representation of the culture, especially knowing that it was directed by Spike Lee. And Spike Lee was always a strategic person when it came to filming scenes and shots in his artwork and his movies. So I'm gonna be using this picture as a reference and recreating this same character, this guy standing here, from different perspective lines and viewpoints. All right, so without further ado, let's get started. So I'm gonna start a new layer and we're just gonna work off this rough sketch that I drew on the top left. The thing about perspective lines, especially when it comes to characters, is it changes the emotions of the scene. So a lot of times when things are drawn from a perspective of a higher angle, it gives the character a smaller, like almost like a smaller presence. It's almost like the character is looking up to someone, and it makes a different impact. When you're looking at an image from a worm's eye view, it makes the character to where he's almost hovering over the camera, so it gives him more of a sense of empowerment, more of a sense of bigger than life or stronger. Not necessarily stronger, but I would say empowerment is the word. And then at eye level, is more like a common used shot where it's not really more empowering or belittling, but it just shows the context of the scene itself. So on eye view, it kind of shows how a person is when it's just being observed from a regular lens. So right now, I'm gonna work on this. I'm gonna do a rough sketch on the top of the bird's eye view and just show you guys how I would approach drawing a character at this angle. So right now I'm not working from a picture reference. I know we talked about that in the last class on ways to draw images from your imagination and without picture reference. So we actually do have a picture reference. I'm gonna draw the same character that's in the worm's eye view, but I'm gonna just draw him from a perspective of the bird's eye view. I found this image on, oh, I'm blocking the mic again. So I found this image online of a character, and it kind of shows the breakdown of how to design a character from the bird's eye perspective. So we're going to kind of use him as a reference to draw my guy. In the past classes, I showed you guys how to start from a gesture drawing and then taking that gesture drawing and making it transparent and almost in pretty much drawing on top of the transparency so that you can get a new layer. So right now, let's crop out this guy. Boom. I'm gonna crop him out so I can get just him in the image, or just the skeleton frame. All right, and on top of this, let's see, we're going to create this character, this guy right here, but from a bird's eye perspective. So we want to start with, if I'm drawing him as a character, I would start with the haircut that I see. So the thing about the bird's eye perspective is, imagine there's a bird that's hovering above your character. And this is where the camera angle is coming from. So if you're looking from the eye of a bird, you will see like the top of a person's head. You'll see more of the top of their shoulders. And, you know, the shirt kind of go down. And in this image over here, he's holding a briefcase. So right here, you see, let's just draw the briefcase if it was in perspective of a bird's eye view. So you'll see the top of the briefcase, which is here. And then I'm just looking at his shoes. So what I'm looking at when I'm drawing this in this perspective is, imagine there was a cylinder. The perspective of the cylinder would kind of go like this, meaning everything at the top will be larger, and as it go down, as it gets to the lower angle, it'll be smaller. And that's because the bird is closer to the top of the image than the bottom. So everything at the top of the image will be larger because of that. Alrighty, so going back to drawing the picture reference, we're going to have him holding a briefcase. So it's almost like his hand drops down to here. And this is a very loose drawing. We always start the illustration in gesture drawing phase, meaning that it doesn't have to be super fleshed out. Really, all you're doing is trying to recreate the image as a rough sketch so that you could know how to draw your picture when you get to the more defined version. And pretty much as I'm looking at the image, I'm making sure that I can see the top of them. And also now, once we get the character down, we can think of the perspective line that's in the back. In this image of the worm's eye view, the perspective line is at the bottom of the frame. So first, let's create a frame. In this frame, we're gonna let's make the perspective line as if it is. Let's make it green on this one. Boom. And I'm gonna take the character away for a second, and we're gonna draw just the background. So this is where the perspective line is. Let's say that these are the buildings, and he's still standing in the street. It's just from a different angle. And let's see. Does this make sense? Here we go. So now we're looking at buildings from a perspective of the perspective line being higher. All right, so let's get to more of a defined sketch on top of this. And let's see, if you're following along, this is a good practice that you can try in your sketchbook that allow you to just see things in a way that's different. All right, so I'm gonna just simplify this character now that I have the rough sketch, right? And I'm keeping him in mind. So this is from imagination. But now that you have your rough sketch down, I'm just following along those same rough sketches, and I'm keeping in mind that it's from a higher angle so I can see the top of his shoulders. We're going to add the t-shirt, and then we're going to do this one we're going to do most of the detail, and I'll break down how to draw the city in the worm's eye view. So alrighty. So like the last class, we started with a gesture drawing, and now you take that rough sketch and you pretty much define that sketch with simplified lines. But with this, you're looking at how the perspective is different. So let's see, let's try something. Well, no, let's stay on. Let's try. Let's finish the character. And then, so it's almost like he's walking. So this foot here is behind the briefcase. And this front foot is kind of walking forward. Alrighty. It looks very rough right now, but let's see. Pretty much, this is the same character in a sense, or this is my interpretation of the character from a bird's eye view. And it's super rough, but it gets the picture done. Then you can draw this kind of design his shirt. He have like a cool artsy shirt like that. And this is very graphic and cartoon style. But he also have on like shorts. So let's redefine his legs. And this is a very simplified cartoon character. And I know people have different styles. So, but the thing about principles is that whichever style that you try it in, the same principle will apply. And the main principle or the things to think about in this illustration is that on bird's eye, you're just imagining that the camera angle is looking from a high perspective. That means you're looking down on the character. So that's going to be my interpretation of him right now. And then we're going to get into, so what would this same angle look like with him in eye level? This same character at eye level, right? Let's see. And we're going to change the opacity of this. All right, here we go. So eye level, let's just say he's standing right here at the bottom left illustration. I'm capturing him in the same stance. the difference between eye level is that on the bird's eye level, you can kind of see the top of his shoulders. On this level here, since it's a little lower than that one, but it's not bird's eye, or it's not worm's eye, it's more so straight on. Meaning, let's see. So we have his briefcase in the front here. And alrighty. His leg. So this is super rough. This is the gesture drawing. You would pretty much, I wonder if this is getting, all right, I'm thinking, I kind of think I want to start on the worm's eye view, because it'll be easier for me to just draw this image opposed to showing the other class. So now let's look at the worm's eye view. And I'm gonna just show you guys how I draw. I'm gonna use this picture as a reference to draw a representation of worm's eye view perspective. So since I know that worm's eye view is from the perspective of the ground level, I want to take this image and kind of overemphasize it a little bit. So I'm just going to select it and make the bottom part a little larger. Let me show you. So we're going to copy and paste. Boom. And then let's hide this one. I'm going to distort it a little bit, and I'm going to make the bottom parts of the picture kind of fan out a little bit. And pretty much what that is doing is it's overemphasizing the shoes. So now when I adjust it or warp the image, it's going to make it to where the shoes seem larger as the top of the head kind of go back into space. And that'll make sense. I think sometimes when you're drawing illustrations, it's good to overemphasize certain aspects, because when you know the camera angle that you want to use and capture, sometimes those overemphasis and using like depth of field helps explain the image way more, or in a different way. So I'm going to cut off all the background layers, and we're just going to focus on drawing this illustration from worm's eye view, right? So first we want to start with your backgrounds. So on the background, the first thing you identify is your perspective line. And from your perspective line, you can now see, I'm gonna create a scene almost like we did in the backgrounds course. We pretty much start from the furthest thing back and work your way to the front. So now that we have a frame, we've identified the perspective line. Let's just fill in the frame with some colors, some pretty much base colors, so that we can see how we'll approach the illustration from a colored point of view. So we have our background image. Let's just say we're going to use sky blue and this yellow grayish color. And I think I want to make it more gray. So boom, that's the street and the skies. And in between, where the sky and the street meets, you can pretty much identify that as your perspective line. So now that we found the street and the sky and we know what's the furthest things back, we want to add the supporting elements, which would be pretty much is this car right here, your buildings you're looking at. So before I go to those, on your perspective line, you want to find and identify a vanishing point. And a vanishing point is pretty much where your eye is guided towards as the things in perspective come to the foreground. So right here, we're going to say that this is the vanishing point. And as we're looking at the buildings, we can see that the background buildings kind of go forward this way. And then right along the perspective line, you see that the eye level is from Worm's eye, but you see the cars on the front of this perspective line. You see that these buildings go at a diagonal angle, and everything based on that perspective is coming from a lower angle, from a lower camera angle. So now that we see that, we want to add, and I want to say that it'll probably be a tree right here in the front, in the foreground. We have our car right here. Now that you identified your perspective line and vanishing point, we're pretty much just adding these supporting elements that we see in relation to the perspective. So the buildings are kind of, and I'm drawing on the back layer, so let me change the opacity. So now you can kind of see more of what's being created. So all of the buildings are kind of going at a vantage point where you can see where the street is leading towards, where the street ends. And let's see. So now you just want to add other little small elements, like you can see this street pole right here. And I have the picture in the background with the opacity lower so that we can kind of see what's going on as we draw it. So this is the image that we're working off of. And I'm pretty much creating like a skeleton of the image that we're looking at. So boom, we see this light pole right here that kind of comes from, then we have this building here. And it cuts off, the image cuts off, but based on the perspective principle, I can kind of predict that it'll be a building that's coming at this angle. This is the side of this building. And as you see, the size of the buildings are one thing, but the humans, you can see that the people in the background are all at this lower, they're all around this perspective line. So let's look at the image. Let's look at the rough sketch of what we created. So this is kind of the skeleton of what the background of the image is looking like. Without the main character added yet, we just want to make a skeleton of the background perspective so that when we add the character, he'll be in relativity to the background, and it won't look, it'll look consistent. It won't look lopsided. So let's recreate the background, and then we're gonna knock out the character in perspective. And at the end, it should have a sense of this guy it's going to be a closer up to the shoe since it's bird's eye. And it'll be a dope way to see him in perspective. So now I'm going to kind of clean up the lines that I drew and recreate my own scene based off what we just created from, pretty much what we created from the picture reference. And like I said in the other classes, it's cool to work from the picture reference, but it's also a great practice to be able to kind of capture the picture reference as a skeleton or as a gesture drawing, and then go in and pretty much work from the image that you created from the picture reference itself. This gives more of a sense of originality, and sometimes it's like a muscle memory, or it's almost a practice of being able to create images and artwork from your mind instead of having to use picture references as a crutch. And you don't really have to think about, like, sometimes I draw very loosely because I know, well, as long as I'm following the perspective line and the principle, however the new sketch come out is still gonna look pretty cool because those principles were applied. Opposed to if I was just drawing this without the perspective line guide or anything, sometimes a lot of artists make a mistake by, like, it'll look kind of funny, or the buildings or the shapes of the buildings and things look weird when certain principles, especially with perspective, isn't followed. So now I'm just creating, a sidewalk. I know that I'm gonna have like smaller characters in the background here, just like human beings. And you can see that they're way smaller in perspective. And that has to do with depth of field. So also along with perspective lines is what is called depth of field, meaning the closer up a person is to the camera, kind of like the main character here, the larger he would be because he's closer to the front of the camera. And I'm probably going to even overemphasize him a little bit and make him larger than what he is. And then the things that are farther away in the background, as it relates to perspective, the farther away it is, the smaller that person would be. So as I'm drawing these characters to the side, the farther away they are from, or the closer they are to the vanishing point, pretty much, the smaller they get. Because everything in space, everything that's going back and further in space is getting smaller. Pretty much our eyes still see it, but the further back you go, the smaller it gets in perspective. So boom, we have some new building outlines here. And I'm gonna create a rough background scene so that my character can have a cool background setting for the scene that he's in. And so now that I'm recreating my own background scene, what I have in mind as I'm creating this is, well, I kind of want to make it look like an urban area, or like a neighborhood that's not necessarily torn down, but it's a super urban area. So it's like a lot of companies and businesses, but also the cars are kind of old school. So you can tell it's not like a super rich neighborhood, but at the same time, it's like not your average It's a dope community or street view of something, some sorts. However you want to create it. So let's look at what we have now. So boom, this is a more simplified version of our gesture drawing. So now that we have that version down, this makes it easier for you to just quickly fill in your colors. And I'm not going to spend too much time on the background because when you're creating backgrounds, they're supposed to be secondary to what's going on in the main scene. And our main scene is going to be the character that we design. So I'm drawing the necessary details in the background that captures the perspective and captures the line of the perspective. I'm not drawing it so detailed to where it distracts from our main character. So now I'm just going to fill in a few colors. So we want to have a sky blue. Let's just say that this is a random tree in the front. I don't know, that's a weird looking tree. I think we can just stop the buildings right here. So let's make this the skies as well. And we're going to erase this. I was going to make it a tree, but I think it'll be distracting, so we're just going to make it all skies. So boom, now we have the side of a building right here. So we're going to say the side of the building is like this dark gray. And sometimes when it fill in other layers, that mean that there's a gap in the lines that you just have to fill in. So the side is a darker gray. Let's say the front of the building is like that. And I'm pretty much just bringing colors from a pre-made color palette that I have. And when you're thinking about the colors that you add to your image, it's really, well, we'll talk about it we'll talk about that in the next class in terms of color theory and how to select the colors that you want to use when you're placing them in your background or your scenes. But a good rule of thumb is pretty much warm colors, they ascend to the front, and cooler colors descend to the back. So naturally, the sky blue, since it's a cooler color, when I see the sky blue, it naturally makes it look like it's further in the background. And I like to put more warmer toned like colors in the foreground because that helps it gives a sense of it's closer to the front than the cooler tones. And then as it traveled back in space, maybe I can throw more cooler buildings back in the background, but I'm pretty much going through the entire image and just blocking in colors so that I can have those as so I can have the picture to where it looks full. And let's see. So we're just going to fill in like maybe the signs on the top of the buildings. And I'm kind of choosing these colors at random, but at the same time, I'm choosing them based on, I want to have warmer things in the front, cooler things in the back. So with that in mind, with this car right here, maybe I want to have the yellow car. Boom. But so far, so we have our perspective line that's very low at the bottom. And if you're working on Procreate or a digital app, some platforms may have this. I know Procreate have a tool that you can use where, let's see, reference tool. Nope, that's not it. You have drawing guides on Procreate where you can choose perspective, and you can select a perspective on your drawing guide, and it shows you the perspective lines that you can use. So now you can see how, let's see, I'm gonna choose a color that shows. Boom, now you can see how the perspectives of the buildings are aligned with the vanishing point. If you're not using Procreate and you're working on like a sheet of paper or something, all you have to do is choose your perspective line, and then, or choose your vanishing point, which is right here. And from that vanishing point, you pretty much have diagonal lines that come from that vanishing point. Let's see. With 1 second, let's see. All right. So, booyah. So, with that in mind, let's move forward. So, I'm going to fill in the buildings on the left side. Let's see. So, I'm going to make some 10. And I'm working from a color palette that I pre-created. And I'm just going to fill all the buildings in, keeping the color scheme pretty neutral. And we're just creating this background so that we can go to the main character. Let's say the street is like this yellowish gray color here. Boom. Alrighty. Alrighty. Boom. So, there we go. So now we have pretty much everything filled in, like all the colors blocked in. We have this car in the front. Let's say that this car is like this grayish color. Now we've created an official background for our character that's in perspective. And it's going to set the tone for the perspective of our character himself. And right now it's super rough, but with this same approach and this same attention to perspective, you can get very detailed with your image as long as you follow the perspective lines that's present here. So I'm just finalizing the images, the image colors, boom. And there we have it. So now let's go to our character and the guy that we're drawing. I'm just going to add him to the top. And so now imagine I'm going to get rid of the background right now, and we're just going to focus on recreating our character in worm's eye perspective. So it'll look like he's standing right in front of the camera on the street, in the street view. So earlier we already worked the image so to where we can see his shoes and we can see that he's like right in front of the camera. So now let's just take the same image, and in the last class we talked about how to take an image and recreate it without tracing. Right now we're just gonna do the easy thing and trace them. And a lot of times it's a bad perception that, oh, if I trace an image, I'm cheating, or you don't supposed to trace images as an illustrator. But in actuality, this is the easiest way to get a very dope image, is by capturing what's already there. And sometimes for more commercial projects, some clients and people like having pictures that reference things specifically. So sometimes when you're drawing from, memory, it's a little harder to reference things that specific because it takes a certain type of way of seeing and illustrating it that you have to deal with. So if you just work directly from the picture reference, it makes it easier for you to get those details and things that you really want to capture. And at the same time, you can still make it your own as you reference the picture. So he's holding, it looks like a boombox. We're going to make it to where he's holding a huge boombox radio. So boom, we have this right here. Booyah. So I'm just capturing the main elements. So I'm capturing his hand as he's holding the handle on the boombox. Let's see. I'm gonna get more of the detail on the boombox now. Well, I'm gonna make up my own. I'm gonna say it's like a speaker right here, and then it's a speaker right here, kind of like those old school b-boys back in New York, like the hip hop heads. They'll like come outside and like set up a huge radio on the sidewalk, and they just start breakdancing and things. So I'm gonna make up my own radio right here and put buttons. And that's something I always encourage the artists to do. It's cool to work from the picture reference, but sometimes you got to realize you have creative control. So you don't have to be super defined and stuck on the picture reference. You can always add your own elements and things that you want to create. Things you want to add and modify and make your own style. Because at the end of the day, that's what artists do. We're capturing the culture, but simultaneously we're creating the culture too. So I think as we capture the culture from our own lens and perspective, the way that we capture it and the style in which we capture the culture, we're actually creating a culture just by observing the culture itself. So keeping that in mind, you want to bring your own style to capturing the culture every time you do it. So it's like pretty much finding a good balance between doing your own thing and using and working from the reference. So since we're talking about capture the culture, he's wearing a cool shirt. And it looks like the shirt says do or die. But I'm going to switch up the words and put culture. Culture. Since we're talking about culture. And at the top of the shirt, it looks like it says Freddy or something. And I'm going to put capture. Capture the. So boom, we just recreated our own fashion and design. And he got like a cool little Picasso drawing on the shirt. So that's kind of dope. I'm gonna recreate. I'm following the lines that I see, and I'm gonna recreate it. So, snowman. So boom, this is gonna be his new age shirt right here. Capture the culture. I might have to make that as a real T-shirt. Who knows? Like a dope capture the culture T-shirt. So now we're just mapping out his head and his ears. And we're gonna create a cool face for him. Boom, the nose. And not getting too detailed, but just capturing the main elements. Gotta catch the box haircut. I might even just kind of overemphasize his haircut and give him a cool tall box fade like the kid in Play. Gotta shape it up a little bit though. So boom, there we have it. Now we have a new outline sketch drawing for the illustration itself. So pretty much what I did is when you're working from reference, you can choose to trace the image or you can choose to draw the image from scratch. Pretty much when you're drawing an image from scratch, you kind of start with a gesture drawing and you capture the outline on, you start with a gesture drawing. Then once you finish with your gesture or what you see, then you go into defining, you pretty much make that gesture drawing transparent, or you change the opacity. You create another layer on top of it, and you create more defined lines on that new layer. That's when you're drawing an image from scratch and you're not tracing it or anything. But if you have an image that you're working from or that you're tracing, you can pretty much skip the gesture drawing phase and go directly to drawing the image as the defined line, because you already have the image itself as not necessarily a gesture drawing, but it defeats the purpose to draw it as a gesture if it's already there. You just trace the main defining characteristics of the actual image itself. So that's what we're doing here. I'm gonna capture a few little details on the shoes, and then boom. And then next, after this, we're gonna color it in. So now I have my character, and he's in perspective of the image, and he's in worm eye perspective. So as you can see, the shoes are kind of large. The shoes are almost the same size as his head. And in reality, we know that that wouldn't be true, but since we're drawing from the worm's eye perspective, it changes the size of certain elements to where it's pretty much called foreshortening. Since the shoe is the closest thing to the front of the camera or the closest thing to the front of the worm, it'll be the largest thing that you see. Or if not the largest thing, it'll be larger than the other proportions on the body. So now that we have our we have our drawing, our sketch, our line sketch. We can see how it looks in relativity to the background that we created. And now it looks like, you know, so we have the low angle horizon line, and then we have him walking. So now it looks like we're looking up to him. Like we're looking up to him. He's like a man on a mission, walking to go find somewhere to jam his music or something, who knows. So boom. Now we just want to color him in, and the picture reference is black and white. So that just gives us the creative freedom to give him any type of fashion or color that we want. So I think I want to go with the red shorts. I think the red shorts would be pretty cool. And let's say he's like a brown complexion. Boom. I'm going to add him in HD. And the same thing we did in the last class. When you're coloring in your characters, I always start with just a simple base color. And then after you have your base color down, that's when you're able to select those base colors and add your highlights and shadows. And those are going to be the things that that's going to bring the depth of the illustration out. But first, before you get into the small details and the shadowing, you just want to block out your main elements so that you have the gist of it down. And also what it does is you can separate your character from the background. So I'm giving like a black lip, and he's like a cool guy. So let's see. We're going to fill in the eyes. Let's say you have like the white part of the eyes right here. So boom, he's looking off into space. So, you know, this makes it easier. Before you go in and add the details, you can kind of shape up how you want your character to look. You're pretty much in character design phase right now. So it's always best to start simple, then get complicated. Because if you start complicated and try to go in with the tightest details and the close things, you'll pretty much lose focus or you'll take more time to really knock out the things that's important. And if you make a mistake on proportions or something early on, while you focusing on the small detail, you're going to have to like start over and redo the things when you could have just, you know, start broad and fill in the simple things, then work your way to the more detailed things. So I'm just blocking in the colors, filling in a few shadows, and let's see, what color he's going to have on a white t-shirt. So instead of making it completely white, I'm going to make it like a mint green. And then the image on the shirt is like an abstract. I'm going to call it an abstract Picasso. It's the black Picasso. So boom. It's going to be a cool, colorful shirt. So let's just say on this shirt, he have like let's see. Let's try some new colors. And pretty much the colors that you select early on, you don't have to stress about them too much, because that's the advantage of filling in the layers and blocking out colors, is you can always go in and select the colors that you put down and modify them as you like. So I'm selecting colors at random because I know that I can always go in and change them if I, see something that I like different. So boom, the goal and objective is to fill in all these spaces. I kind of like this color scheme and what's going on, so I might not even change the shirt. This could be a shirt that I would wear in real life. The 90s fashion set the tone for the culture, especially with the Spike Lee movies and the Martins and the Fresh Prince of Bel-Airs. Like, they really introduced super dope, vibrant colors. And they often kind of represented the HBCUs and things. So they really set the tone for the culture. And so I think something like this t-shirt here represents like a cool, dope 90s fashion with the colors. So we're going to go with this. All right, I need one more color. I'm going to use the gold. Maybe I'll use gray. Boom. All right, so we have our shirt. We're almost done blocking them in. I'm gonna say we're gonna give them like a cool gold bracelet right here. Now we're gonna fill in our boom box or our beat box. Let's say so we gotta close off the areas. Let's say the side of it is like a dark navy blue. And what color do I want to make? Let's see. Let's turn on the background and see what color makes sense based on the background. So in the background, we have a lot of warm tones besides the sky. So when I'm thinking about colors, sometimes I want to find colors that's on the opposite spectrum of what's in the background. So right now, we're in like the yellowish warm tones in the background. So I want to find a color that's more on the opposite side, maybe blue, purples. I think blue would be cool, like maybe a saturated type of blue radio. So boom, with the gold speakers. So now we know that color will pop from the background. And it's, what I'm going for in this illustration is like a cool urban vibe. And the top part, let's say the top part is like chrome or something. So we're just gonna fill this in gray. Boom. And let's see. So pretty much we're blocking out all of these elements on the character so that it won't be any holes or you can't see the background through the picture. And sometimes the strategy for illustrators and things is, let me do it real quick. Sometimes we have our character, but sometimes we may miss a few spaces or forget to block in certain areas, or it's like super small spaces that you miss. So what I do to solve that is I just duplicate the layer that I have. And with that same layer that I duplicated, I pretty much create a silhouette of that layer in the background. So I'm going to take him and I'm just going to fill him all black. Fill in the whole background layer is black. And what this does is all of those areas and spaces that I missed on my image in the front, it'll just be filled in black on the background layer. That way I know that I'm not missing any small areas or any other extra areas, just be filled in black, and it won't be such a distraction. Or when you add your background layer back, you won't see like different holes of color showing in the background. Alrighty, so now we're going to fill in the shoes. It looks like they're all white shoes. I want to kind of design my own, and I want to give him, since he's wearing the red shorts, he'll have like some red parts on his shoes. I think that'll be dope. And then the rest of the shoe will be white. Or not white, but I'm gonna just use like this mint white color. So boom. Now we have the 90s fashion going. And I'm actually use white for the bottom part. So we got our mint white shoes with the boom. I think we're just gonna modify the tongue a little bit. So now we have our character roughly done, and we've created him in worm's eye perspective. So if we clear everything off the background, we have this cool image of the guy. So from here, you want to pretty much, what I want to do now is create less distractions and make the focus more on the guy. So I kind of want to change and play around with the color of the background and make it a little more saturated. Or you just want to change the tones. That's the advantage of having your layers on, like separating your character layer from your background layer, is that you're able to adjust and modify the colors and tones as it fit. So I'm gonna just kind of make the background a little darker, and I want to make his layer a little brighter. And you also can do things like, let's see, I'm just gonna merge these two layers together. So you can, he can be breaking out of the frame, or if you want to make him smaller, there's different things you can do to adjust him. But now that you created a background and you have a character, you have a scene. And in the scene, we're capturing culture, because we're capturing the culture with the color schemes, with the shoes, with the music, the elements. So the elements in the picture itself are the things that captures the culture. And the principle that we're following in the picture is perspective. So I've learned when you're able to merge those two things, we're able to merge elements of culture or elements of things that people remember, and you're able to merge that with technical symbols, or not necessarily symbols, but technical principles of creating, such as following perspective lines. You naturally create a image that turns out dope, like subconsciously to the audience. So now I'm just filling in other areas of the image. Like, I think I want to make this car here sky blue. And we have people back here to where, even though they're like random blobs and shapes, it still reads as people. And since they are smaller than the background, it puts them into perspective. And since they're not the main characters, people won't even focus on what they look like, but they can still identify them as like, oh, those are little human beings, or those are little characters back there. So it kind of shows that you capture the bigger picture of things and then go into detail as you move along. So now I'm just finishing blocking in the colors of the background. I kind of want to catch this. I want to catch this light pole back here in the frame. So let's see. What I'm gonna do is shrink the character down so that I can catch the light pole. So let's do this. Or I'm gonna just scoot them over a little bit. So that's the cool part. And then I also like having elements of the frame, like break out elements of the picture, break out the frame, just because I think it's dope. Let's see. So boom, finishing up the backgrounds, small white spaces, and let's see, same thing apply for this. Like if you have a lot of extra white spaces that you don't know what to do with, just make a background layer or make a layer that's behind that one. So I'm gonna duplicate, or actually I'm not even gonna duplicate it. I'm just gonna make a new layer and I'm gonna make this layer opacity, bring the opacity down, and I'm just going to pretty much recreate this square. So we're working with a square frame. So I'll just create this same square and fill it in a solid color. And that way I know that, you know, everything in this picture in front of it is going to be filled in, even if I didn't get a chance. You know, it's not going to be any holes or things in this picture in the front image that that's not actually there. So now that we have that done, what's next? Boom. So based on the last class, what we would do next is block out, you know, we would go in and fill in the highlights and shadows on your character and the details. I'm not going to do that in this class because I think we captured what we were going for with this image right now. You know, with the simplicity, we were able to draw we were able to draw an image from Worm's eye point of view, and we were also able to create a character that that fits in that Worm's eye point of view. So let me go back. So boom, we have our character, which is right here. Then we have our background, both in perspective. So if we go back to the illustrations that we were drawing earlier, where we have a bird's eye view. So this is going to be the last thing and we're going to wrap up the class. But let's look at characters in perspective of those eye views, like those bird's eye view. What we just created now is a guy from Worm's eye view. So observing him, you see that, boom, sometimes you can even overemphasize, but the shoes are the largest thing in the frame. Not necessarily the largest things, but we overemphasize the shoes since the camera angle is at the bottom. In this illustration up here, we can almost overemphasize like the top of his head, and I'm gonna put it in freeform. And let's see, let's try to distort him and make this guy to where he fits in worm's eye view or bird's eye view. So over here, he's more in bird's eye view. So if we were to fill in his shirt, fill in his shorts, same skin tone. And this is a rough sketch of it, but pretty much the head is like larger than the body itself. Well, not larger than the body, but the head is more emphasized and more of the forefront than the shoes, whereas the shoes are a little smaller because they're going back into perspective. So hopefully this is making sense. Let's see. So we can see that the shoes are smaller. And then this guy here would be a representation of, you know, eye level. Let's see. So I'm like quickly filling him in so that he can match. And maybe when we have more time, I'll expand on the concept and I'll draw out all three perspectives in full so that you can really see the dynamic and the change of the characters as you draw them in different eye points of views and perspectives. So right now, right here, this guy is super abstract, but he represents the character who would be eye level, which, let's see, more so with this eye level perspective character, everything is more in proportion. So the shoes aren't really larger than the head and vice versa. He's kind of equally balanced and you can see him from the front on perspective. But let's see. So there we have it. Let's bring up the other guy. Nope, that's not him. Oh, here we go. So hopefully this makes sense. And the main goal today was to really illustrate my guy here. We captured the culture, drew him in perspective of worm's eye view, and I think we talked about how to draw your background first in perspective, which is this background here is drawn in perspective of a lower perspective line, which leaves a lot of space at the top. And then the character is drawn in perspective of, you know, worm's eye view as well, meaning when you look at them, you almost have to look up at them, and certain parts of the illustration is more foreshortened and coming to the front. And so that's it for today. I know it was a little scattered mind, but we did get the main focus down, which is perspective. Next class, I'm looking forward to teaching you how to put your simplified drawings into animated forms. And we're going to be talking more on adding motion to your illustrations and your drawings with the same elements that we talked about in the past, such as backgrounds, perspectives, and, you know, capturing those things, capturing specific moments. We're going to be merging those, all those elements and discussing how to add motion, basic motion. So for those artists who are illustrators who are looking into getting into animation or want to know the basic characteristics of how to animate things, that's something that we'll be talking about in the next class coming up. So definitely stay tuned. This has been another episode of Capture the Culture Illustrated Masterclass. Hopefully you're learning some productive things, and I look forward to seeing you guys and creating art with you guys next time.